Seasoned Chef Troy Vincent here, and today we're going to be doing chili. So what I'm going to start off with is about 2 pounds of ground beef here, onion. I have some chili powder. I have to get this from the south, and now you can use whatever chili powder you have. And I actually like to put a sprinkle of smoked paprika into the meat when I'm cooking it. And I have what I have here is chili beans, a can of tomatoes, which I'm, covering the label there, a can of sauce, tomato sauce, and then a can of light red kidney beans. Now, some people don't prefer those; they prefer the dark, or they just use more chili beans. It depends on you and what you like. I like to make mine really hearty, so I usually try to use another kind of beans, not just one. And then onion, of course, which I put in with the beef when it's frying. And I actually wait till I start frying this so that it actually has a little fluid in the bottom of the pan, so the onions won't stick to the pan. And I'll get started and set up my camera here in just a minute. Okay, I'm going to start by putting my 2 pounds of ground beef into the pan, and I'll add a little seasoning, a little salt and pepper onto the ground beef, because I like to have a little seasoning in the meat, as I said, and a little secret ingredient of mine, and a tiny bit of the smoked paprika, because it gives a little smokiness to the meat. And I'll turn this on about medium. Now, one thing you'll notice is my beef was a little frozen, because I do buy it and freeze it. And one of the things that some people do, and you can do this too, is you can actually add a little bit of water to start with, especially if it's frozen. And this will all actually cook down. If you don't put too much, it'll cook down as you cook it for a while and get all the meat well done. And I'm not going to bore you with that, and I'm going to cut it off here and we'll come back. And one thing I wanted to point out real fast is a lot of times when people have frozen ground beef, they'll put it in and they'll start cooking it down, and they over chop the meat. It ends up like a fine, scrabble, whatever they call it. There's a word for that. But I don't do that. What I let it do is I let it brown till it's almost an inch thick. I'll scrape it off, and then I will barely take it apart, so you end up with like larger chunks of beef, especially for chili. Maybe for some other recipes you would like your ground beef to be, small dice, very small dice. But I like, chili to be, have large chunks. So I generally let it sit a little bit, and then shave off layers, and then just barely cut that up a little bit, and so I have larger pieces of ground beef. Okay, now the next step is, once I get it down, there's probably like an inch of meat on each one of these left, maybe a little bit more on this one. But what I'll do is I'll go ahead and incorporate the onions, and I'll break those up a little bit in there, but I don't want to break up my meat too much. And one thing you'll notice, there's a lot of juice in that, and that's all that water. This beef is really lean, so there will be, by the time this cooks down and the meat is done, there will be very little water left in here. And I'll drain off whatever grease is in here, whatever fat remains, but which won't be very much in this, because as I said, this is some actually really very lean ground beef. Now, one other thing I want to share, and I always do this on the Seasoned Chef, is I always try to point out tips or tricks or things that maybe a lot of people don't know, maybe some people do. But I buy this. I'm not advertising for them, but this is a chili powder I get down south. You can't find it in Ohio, at least this part of Ohio. I'm in the extreme northeast. And there's another brand that I used to get called Maxine that's pretty good too. Blomer's is I always buy a lot of them, and I take them and I actually open them and fill this thing up with them, with the little packages. And if you ever, if you don't have chili powder, and this is what I tell a lot of people, if you don't have chili powder, And you tell me you don't have, I don't have chili powder. I go, well, do you have ground cumin? You say yes. I said, do you have onion powder? Yes. Do you have salt? Yes. Do you have pepper? Do you have red pepper and paprika and onion powder, garlic powder? If you have all those things, you can actually create your own chili powder. So a lot of people don't know the basis of chili powder is mostly cumin. That's what gives it that really chili flavor is ground cumin. Onion powder, garlic powder, a little salt, little pepper, and a little paprika. Now if you want it spicy, you can put a pinch of cayenne pepper if you have it, but you have to be careful with the cayenne because now cayenne pepper ground out of the, when you get it fresh and it's out, you know, freshly dried, if it can be really hot. So you have to be careful with the cayenne pepper. Yay. Okay, as you can see, my burger's really pretty much cooked down. My onions are almost cooked. And you can see there's a little bit of oil. This is probably fatter than the last ones I had out of here. And there's probably maybe 3 or 4 tablespoons of fat in there. But I'll go ahead and drain that. And one more thing I wanted to tell you was just like with the onion powder, like when people tell me they don't have any Italian seasoning, I go, well, do you have thyme, basil, oregano, and rosemary? Yes. Well, you can make your own mixture. You can see once you understand what levels of each, and I'll tell you one of the things is basil is probably one of the main ingredients in making Italian seasoning as well, because it is sweet. It has a sweeter flavor, so it is basically, you know, probably mostly basil, and not the oregano can be overpowering, so can rosemary, so you have to be careful in adding those two. Thyme can also be a little powerful, but not quite so much as the rosemary and the basil, or in the oregano, sorry. But anyway, after a while, you get to working with herbs a lot, and that's why, you know, I'm called the seasoned chef, you know, because I know a lot about herbs and spices. So that's one of the things, is once you learn to use them, it becomes a lot easier for you to just about make anything. Okay, I wish I could tell you the rest of this is really complicated, but it's not. So the first thing I do is just, after I've drained the grease off, the fat, I just put this large can. Now another thing is there's no set way to make chili. A lot of people do it a lot of different ways. This is the way I'm doing it right now. I do sometimes get cans of the type of chili beans I have here. The same brand makes a can of chili mix that already has beans, but as I just literally pour it all in. The only thing I don't like pouring in is the kidney beans. They have a weird juice, and I always rinse them off because I always found it to be a little too slimy for my taste. I didn't care for it, so I always rinse the kidney beans off. And as far as the chili beans, they come with a flavor in the sauce. There's a chili flavor also in the sauce, which also will help you reduce the amount of chili powder you use. And then the last thing is the tomatoes, and these tomatoes are one I used to use just straight tomatoes, or sometimes I use fire roasted tomatoes, which give you a little more of that smoky flavor as well. And really, this is it. I mean, the only other thing I can tell you now is that I also, you know, I add the chili powder, of course. And here, I'm just gonna, and I usually use about what is equal to one of those packs, so probably does me a little good to put them in here, but it just makes it easier when I'm doing it to stop and try to open a little plastic package, because we know how plastic packaging works these days. They don't open very well unless you have a pair of scissors. And one more thing, I can smell it already. I could smell the little bit of smokiness in the hamburger when I was draining it. I was like, oh, that smells so good. But this right here is basically it, and you just let it cook for a while. Let me turn this back on, because I turned it off so I didn't burn my hands when I was actually draining the grease. I did it right here, and I got a little bit more fat than I normally do out of that hamburger. So anyway, I'm gonna let this simmer for a while. One other thing they do down south is they'll cook elbow macaroni or spaghetti sometimes and put it in the chili. They'll call it chili mac if it's elbow macaroni. I grew up with it like that. A lot of people don't, oh no, what are you putting spaghetti in your chili for? Well, that's just the way I always grew up eating it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cook me a little bit of spaghetti, because the last 2 times I made chili I had elbow macaroni. So this time I'm doing spaghetti and changing it up a little bit. But you could really certainly just eat this the way it is. You could cook hot dogs, put it on your hot dogs, put some cheese on it. There's really no limitations, and you can season it, you can put hot sauce in it, you can do anything you want to chili, but don't put marshmallow cream in it, you know, just kidding. Anyway, that's it. That's how you make chili. Let it simmer for a little while, heat up, and when I come back, I'll give it a taste test for you. Another thing I've seen guys do is not only add the can of tomato sauce, but then to add a can of tomato juice at the end, and you're making quite a bit of chili once you start adding a lot more stuff. As you can see, with just 2 pounds of ground beef, a can of tomato sauce, 3 cans of beans actually, including the kidney beans, and 1 can of the diced tomatoes, it made pretty much a pot full here. I've seen people add sugar, tomato juice, all kinds of other things. And again, my thing is also, I have this thing called, I don't know if I cut this out of the last video because I had to erase a video, I messed up. Is smoked salt, hickory smoked salt, and I put that in there. And you know, earlier I put smoked paprika into the ground beef, and it had just a little bit, and I added a little bit more. Plus I've added some hot sauce since you're off camera, and a couple other things. I tend to make things the way I like them, and I don't necessarily expect everyone's going to do the same thing. I added hot sauce and some more of that hickory smoked salt, actually, to give it more of a smoky flavor. You can do the same thing. You can stick with the regular thing I already made. If you don't have smoked paprika, you don't even have to use it. So again, with chili, and as the last video I did was about clam chowder, anything like soup, you really don't have to be that precise. You can almost kind of do anything, really. Now, unlike cakes or whatever, you know, you're following cake batter recipes, you're going to have to kind of adhere to what it says as far as your baking powder, baking soda, and your salt and egg and all that, so your cake will rise right. Soups, chili, anything like that is a lot more lenient. You can kind of experiment around. Same thing with just about any soup. A lot of things you can play around with, and it's one thing you'll figure out after a while. With cooking, you can do almost anything. Anyway, I'm going to let this simmer a little longer. As you can see, it's starting to bubble really good now, and it's been simmering for a few minutes since I cut off the video last time. And I'll be back, and I'm going to taste it, and that'll be it. Okay, I let this simmer for a little while. My pasta's done. I'm going to taste this. For people who don't like pasta in it, so this is out of respect for you, I'm going to taste it without the pasta in it. And I let it reduce a little bit, but I don't reduce it down a lot, because when I add the pasta, it was still, even though it's fully cooked, it will also absorb some more of the moisture out, and it'll make it really, really thick. And it's almost, I don't really care for it that thick, so I don't really reduce it down a lot. But you want to cook it long enough for all those flavors to incorporate, you know, the smoke and the paprika from the paprika, the smoke from the salt, the chili powder, the cumin, all that. So let me taste it here. Here we go. No. Oh, it is so good. So good. You don't know what you're missing. The smell in here is incredible. Have a nice time.